Awkward.
Yep.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Elbows Tight Podcast. It's your host, Travis. Today I have a recurring guest, my good friend from BJJ Mental Model, Steve Kwan. Steve, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, Travis. Happy Sunday as of our recording. Greetings from Vancouver, BC. And in case you're wondering, I am drinking a Strange Fellows IPA, a local brewery here. This is very important business, I know.
Got to be professional with it. Got to maintain it.
They're not my sponsor, but it's a good IPA. So I just want everyone out there to know that if they're ever in the BC area.
Yeah, I recently quit drinking. Well, not recently, about a little over a year ago, I quit drinking, and I was like, oh man, I still like enjoyed the taste of beer, and so I'll get like non-alcoholic beer, and they actually have some like really good IPA-esque like non-alcoholic beer, and I was like, man, I still love this stuff so much. I was like, I just don't want to get drunk anymore. But it's a good alternative.
You know what? I mean, real talk here, right? I mean, as I get older, I really struggle to drink like, when I was younger, I could drink socially, but now, especially, being over 40, my body don't like it when I drink alcohol. I have to be very regulated because it does me in. It's not even a matter of getting drunk or buzzed. It just makes me feel like garbage, which is probably good. Agreed. Because I mean, it's basically just straight poison.
Yeah,
right?
Literally.
It's not good for your body. I am not encouraging that everyone go there and drink, but like you said, there are actually some good fake ones. One that we keep in the house, Guinness's 0%.
Yes,
if you're into Guinness, is real good.
I just got that.
You cannot tell the difference between, or at least I can't. I cannot tell the difference between that and the alcoholic version. So if you are trying to get off of this awful stuff, 0% Guinness is my recommendation, is your nicotine patch.
Yeah, I one of the first ones I had was Athletic Brewing, which is, I don't know if you guys have it up there, but it's big down here, and they were really good. They're the ones that have like the IPAs and stuff like that. But I had the non-alcoholic Corona, and my buddy was like, "How was it?" I was like, "Man, it's great. It's just as shitty as a normal Corona. I love it."
It tastes like piss water, just like real Corona. Yeah,
it's
you need
great.
to put a lime in it so it tastes like something, just like real Corona.
So that's been like my thing, and I noticed a big difference too. Like I wasn't a heavy drinker beforehand, but my wife was like, "Yeah, you don't really drink anyway, so it's not like it's a big thing for you to stop drinking." But I did notice like I lost a little bit of weight almost instantaneously from not drinking a beer every night or every other night, or even on the weekends having 2 or 3 of them. And I don't know. I also don't drink sugar soda anymore. Now all my soda sugar free, so I'll be sure to get that brain cancer in just a couple years, but. Yeah, it's been a cool year. And then it's also always cool telling people you don't drink, and then I'm like, oh, that's cool. I could never do that. So, but hey, Steve, the topic I want to talk about today, we were talking about this beforehand, is the importance of failure in your jiu-jitsu or your jiu-jitsu journey. Recently, about 6 months ago, I was promoted to purple belt, and I could tell by the end of my blue belt days that I didn't want to fail anymore. Right. I would go to class and I would try to, and this is going to sound super stupid because it doesn't matter to anyone, especially not my coach, who's one of my best friends. But I would go to class thinking I can't get submitted by anyone. I have to prove that I deserve a purple belt. I have to do the best I possibly can. I got to work on my A game. That way people see that I'm good and this and that. And then right after I got my purple belt, I realized like that was so dumb. Like, why did I have that mindset? So I want to talk about failure day and like where your perspective from failing in jiu-jitsu has kind of been from and stuff like that. Real quick, let's talk about the importance of salt and electrolytes for a BJJ practitioner. And that's where today's sponsor, Salt Electrolytes, come in. Save 15% off your purchase at saltelectrolytes.com with code ElbowsTight15 at checkout. Once again, that's 15% off at saltelectrolytes.com with code ElbowsTight15 at checkout. Or use the link down below. Now, Salt Electrolytes drink mix is designed for today's warriors, athletes, and those who like to get after it and regularly get sweaty. Whether you're a heavy sweater that we've all seen on Instagram that needs a wet floor sign right next to them whenever they roll, or you're like a normal human being like me who barely sweats at all. With a light, refreshing flavor, salt is great to drink during your workout because it will not coat your mouth that thick, nasty film that some electrolytes drinks out there do. It has the perfect saltiness that's as easily to make you want to drink more, making rehydration a breeze. And salt keeps it simple, guys. There's only 6 different electrolytes with a touch of iodine to help maintain the healthy thyroid. There's no sugars, there's no colors, and there's no BS. So go earn your salt, guys and gals. And save 15% off your checkout at saltelectrolytes.com with code ElbowsTight15 at checkout. That's saltelectrolytes.com with code ElbowsTight15 at checkout to save 15% off. because your electrolyte drink should work just as hard as you do. Thanks, guys. Go check them out.
Well, you've come to the right place, sir, because like I've said, I would never say that I'm the best jiu-jitsu athlete of all time. I mean, I'm a hobbyist, you know this, everyone knows this, but I will say this, I am amazing at failure. I am awesome. Like no one is going to outperform me when it comes to failure. I am like a freaking grandmaster, red, purple, coral, green, whatever belt. Like I am the expert. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. And of course, on BJJ Mental Models, we've talked about this a lot. I think that the relationship that we have with failure is one of the most important things in terms of how we continue on our jiu-jitsu journey over time. I think that if you fail to be at peace with failure and you don't know how to deal with that emotion, it makes it way more likely that you're going to quit or you're going to be avoidant of difficult situations. I think that leaning into failure is really the key to getting good at pretty much anything. But in jiu-jitsu, it's a much more intimate experience, right? Someone's trying to choke you unconscious or break your arm. So failure is a lot more visible and obvious. And I think that having a good relationship with failure, being able to do it gracefully and well is honestly, it's more important than pretty much anything else in the sport.
Yeah, I completely agree. In your journey, with all the failures that you mentioned and stuff like that, you know, your coral belt at failure. What was one of probably the most pivotal failures or setbacks that you had in your journey in that, and how did it affect your training?
It's a good question. I would classify failure and setbacks as two sort of different things because sometimes a setback can just happen through no fault of your own, which is part of what makes setbacks frustrating because they aren't always your fault, right? You can get injured through no fault of your own. That's a setback, but not necessarily a failure, depending on what happened. To me, a failure is when you did something wrong. And actually, maybe that's too strong language. Not necessarily that you did something wrong, but that what you did not lead to the result that you wanted. And in jiu-jitsu, of course, that is extremely common. I would say that I can't think of a single like individual defining moment where it was so pivotal that it changed the way I thought about jiu-jitsu. But in terms of broad strokes, I know I've told the story before. When I got to 4 stripes on my brown belt, I actually walked away from jiu-jitsu for about a year and a half, and I wasn't sure if I was going to come back at the time. This is before BJJ Mental Models and all of that stuff. I had always just done jiu-jitsu for fun, and you know, people talk about something I'm sure, familiar with, the blue belt blues, right?
Yes.
The kind of feeling of depression and inadequacy and burnout that happens at blue belt. But something that I think people don't talk about enough, which I think also exists, is the brown belt existential crisis, which is that, you know, it's only a matter of time before someone smacks this black belt on you. And you've been working towards this for probably 10 plus years. And you start to get overwhelmed with this feeling of imposter syndrome. And do I deserve this? And am I good enough? And you start looking around at the people in the room next to you and you start thinking, well, I'm a 4-stripe brown belt, but that guy just got his brown belt and he taps me every single time. Like, I'm completely inadequate here. I don't deserve to have this. And you let that thinking get into your head enough, and eventually it can burn you out. It can be a demotivator. For me, I was really concerned about whether I was good enough to be a 4-stripe brown belt / black belt. And when my daughter was born, I used that as an excuse, honestly, to kind of quit jiu-jitsu and to leave it. And a big part of that was because I just wasn't enjoying it anymore. I had gotten so in my head about all of my individual performances that I had lost the passion for this thing that I used to love, which is funny because, like I said, I'm a hobbyist. It's not like I was going out and competing. These are just roles in the gym, but I just didn't feel like I was where I deserved to be or needed to be, or I didn't feel I was good enough to deserve that belt. It took a long time, but like I said, after about a year and a half of being off jiu-jitsu, I started kind of thinking about it and realizing that maybe this wasn't a skill problem, but more of a mindset problem. And taking a kind of a, can I swear on here?
Yes,
taking a like a fuck it approach to looking at your performance and just trying to enjoy the moment and to have fun would be maybe better. And I kind of started changing the way that I thought about jiu-jitsu, thinking less about, am I winning in the room? How am I stacking up to the other brown belts? And just trying to enjoy the moment and enjoy these relationships I was building with people, and to worry less about how good do I look doing this, and am I quote unquote winning in the gym. And the weird thing is, not only did that mindset shift help me enjoy the sport more, which I guess I expected, but it also made me more effective at jiu-jitsu for some reason, to the point where people around me started commenting on the fact that suddenly I got a lot better. And a big part of that was that I honestly kind of just stopped giving a shit, or at least I actively tried to stop giving a shit about failing and getting tapped out by the purple belt or the blue belt, oh God forbid, right? And I found that kind of letting go, releasing all of those all of those insecurities about my self-worth and failure and success, and just focusing on the moment really helped me train. So I would always say, I mean, I think it's inevitable that anyone who trains jujitsu for a long time will have a similar existential crisis like that. And my advice to anyone in that boat would be to release this and let go of this need to win in the gym. Let go of any humiliation or embarrassment that you feel about losing, and accept that that's part of the process. And once you can do that, once you can detach your jujitsu from the need to always be winning and looking good, it gets a lot easier to do jujitsu, and it also gets a lot more fun.
Yeah, coming from us, who's gone through that, it's kind of, I'm not going to say it's easy to say that, but when you're going through it, especially as white belts, it could be very frustrating. It could be very, emotional tolling going to class for, that's why we say like the first 6 months to a year, just give yourself the grace of, you're gonna just get submitted all the time. You're gonna feel like you're not doing good. You're not, these things are gonna be super difficult for you. And it's gonna be hard. You're gonna get submitted a lot. And like your whole first 6 months to a year is gonna feel like a big waste of time. You're gonna feel like a constant failure the whole time. You feel like you're not gonna get anything. You don't know which foot, which hand is your right hand, and stuff like that. How do you help people when they first start in jujitsu, that to like help overcome that? And like, because sometimes saying stuff like that can fall on dead ears, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like when we show a technique and people are like, well, why would I like close guard? Like, why would I go to close guard? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they don't understand the conceptual side of things because it's just so overpowering for them. How do you help with them when they first start to overcome that?
So the best advice I've heard on this, there's an author and business guy named Noah Kagan, and he has this theory, I guess you could call it, that he calls the law of 100. And basically what he says is, if you want to start something new, whether it be acquiring a new skill or starting a new job or business or trying a new whatever, right? If you want to do something new, commit to 100 reps before you even worry about your performance. And I think this is really important because people who are new to jiu-jitsu need to understand, at white belt, how good or bad you are at jiu-jitsu is completely irrelevant, because you are bad at jiu-jitsu. That's the idea, right? You're
100%.
new. Yeah, you're new. So it is very common for beginners to, maybe they're a 3-stripe white belt and they get tapped out by a 2-stripe white belt and they think, oh my God, I'm terrible. I'm awful at jiu-jitsu. I don't deserve this piece of sports tape. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, especially that early on, because everyone is bad at jiu-jitsu at that point. When you are a white belt, the most important indicator to how well you're going to perform in terms of wins and losses, it's not jiu-jitsu skill. It's how athletic are you, right? If someone comes in and they're tapping you out at white belt, it probably means that they were a 300-pound linebacker before they came in here, and you were a 50-year-old accountant, right? That is a much greater indication of who's going to win and lose at white belt. It's just athleticism, because everyone's technique is in the basement. So it's very easy to get discouraged when you try something new, because since your technique is so bad, you're going to be getting your ass kicked left and right. And people who maybe aren't even as dedicated as you, they're going to ride those athletic gifts and they're going to tap you a lot. And that can be extremely demoralizing. And what you have to do if you want to get better is you have to make it through that initial period. White belt is all about attrition. White belt is where most people just get filtered out. That's really all that happens at white belt. You're not going to be a world beater when you get to just by getting past white belt. What white belt does is it tests your ability to stare at adversity and wade through it. That's the most important thing. So I love this concept of the law of 100. The idea being that if you want to try something new, commit to 100 attempts. Don't worry so much about, am I doing it well? Am I not doing it well? But make an agreement to yourself that you're going to try this at least 100 times and then assess from there. This is, I believe, actually, when Noah Kagan talked about this, he was specifically talking about content creators like us. You know, how do you start a podcast? What do you do? Look, there are no shortage of people who will give you advice on the do's and don'ts of something like that. But the most important thing, if you really want to be successful at anything like this, is commit to doing it at least 100 times before you give up, right? The vast majority of podcasts die well before they get to 100 episodes.
Yeah, it's like below 10 episodes.
Yeah.
They all crash and burn.
Yeah. The best thing that you can do if you want to be successful at anything, like even including a podcast, but also including jiu-jitsu, is make sure you put in 100 good attempts. And at that point, then you've got enough of a baseline and enough experience that you can start really thinking about, okay, how can I be better at this? You've gotten past that awkward attrition phase. So my advice to beginners would be, don't even measure wins and losses in the gym. And I know this is hard. Believe me, I was there.
Yeah.
So a big part of it, honestly, is just accepting it in advance and just making a commitment to yourself that, look, if I go in there and I get tapped out 1,000,000 times today, but I feel like I hung in there and I learned something and I had a good time, that's a win. That's how I define victory. I'm not, as a white belt, going to walk in and expect that I'm going to tap a bunch of purple belts. That isn't going to happen. But if I can survive this class and show that I belong in this room, not because I'm particularly skilled, but because I am that dedicated, then that's a win. And what you'll find after you've been through this process enough times, like 100 times, is when you look back on where you came from, you'll realize, man, I am so much better than that guy 100 reps ago. I have gotten so much better at this versus where I was. So that is my advice to beginners, is to think less about wins and losses in the gym and think more about, my goal here is to put in the reps, right? If you wanted to get jacked and put on 20 pounds of muscle, you would not go to the gym and lift weight one time and then get disappointed because you didn't suddenly bulk up, right? You know, it's a process. It takes time. You have to commit to at least 100 reps. I mean, this is a made up number, but the idea is you need to give it a somewhat lengthy commitment before you can expect to see any meaningful results. So my advice to beginners would be, expect that, right? It will not be until you get close to your blue belt, or maybe even after that, that you really start having an idea of where your quote unquote skill level actually stands, right? Before that, it's just a matter of just getting acclimatized to the environment. It says nothing about how good or bad you are. If you're getting tapped out in the gym, no one is judging you.
So to add on to that, sometimes people will give it the 100 reps and they just can't grasp jiu-jitsu, right? They just can't get the rep right. They're extremely frustrated because they feel like their progress is just not going like they should, right? Maybe they've been a white belt 3-4 years. I mean, we've seen it, right? People have been a white belt for a long time or a blue belt for a long time, and they just feel like that progression just isn't there. Things aren't clicking with them still. What would you recommend for someone like that to do?
So there's an old saying, I'm going to try and get this right without butchering it, that the average person kind of, they dramatically overestimate what they can get done in a year, but they also dramatically underestimate what they can get done in 10 years. Often we expect that we're going to be able to achieve these big lofty goals quickly. But over time, if you stick to something long enough, you look back at where you came from and you realize, man, I didn't feel it at the time, but I'm getting, and I have gotten so much better than the person that I was. And it takes a long time to kind of get to that point. There are people out there who sometimes you roll with them and it just doesn't feel like they quite have it, right? But then sometimes things kind of snap together. There are a lot of people who, they get to like brown belt and they really still kind of feel like they're sort of out of place here. And then one day things just click, right? I mean, the example I often give is Braulio Estima, right? Was completely unknown until he got to around, I think, brown belt, maybe it was even black belt. And at that point, he made the commitment that he wanted to do jiu-jitsu full time. And look at him now, right? I mean, suddenly he went from being someone that people didn't even know to being one of the most dominant names in the sport. And we need to understand that skill development is not linear, right? This isn't like a video game where you come into class and I roll for 10 minutes, so I get 100 experience points and I can use that to level up. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes you come in for days, weeks, months, even years and it doesn't feel like you get better. But then sometimes you come in and it feels like in the matter of a week, you got a million times better just because the right thing happened at the right time. You had the right realization about something. And what those realizations are will be completely different for everybody. Some people, maybe I could give some advice to people, and maybe for some people it would be game changing for them, but not for others. Maybe other people need to hear something different, or they need to experience something different. You never know what the thing is going to be that's going to push you to the next level. Again, it's not like a video game where you just go and you kill 20 rats in a shed and suddenly you gain 3 levels, right? You need in jiu-jitsu to just keep at it and accept that growth is not linear. People talk about plateaus a lot in jiu-jitsu, where for those who don't know the language, basically that is the feeling that you're not getting better and that you've been kind of stuck at the same level for a long time. But once you get to black belt, you realize this is not a problem. It's part of the learning process. Sometimes you train for like 3 months straight and it just doesn't feel like you're getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day you come in and things just click for some reason. And unfortunately, despite, no matter how much you study learning methodologies and sports science, there's no way to really create that formula perfectly as to what those breakthrough moments are. The only thing that you can do consistently to get better is be consistent and to show up and train over time. And keeping the motivation and the momentum to do that is way more important than performance in the moment. So I would also say there's a lot more to jiu-jitsu than just who taps who in the gym, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more than that. People sometimes assign all of their worth to, well, who can get the most taps in the gym. That is honestly probably one of the least useful metrics. I mean, I guess maybe it can kind of matter, but look, I'll tell you, as an older black belt, there's a lot of white belts in the gym that I'll just give the round to. Why? Because first of all, maybe I'm trying to work something, right? Maybe I want to give them an opportunity so that they can work things and put me on the defense. But also, if I feel my safety is at risk, I'm just not even going to take the chance, right? I don't stand to gain anything by going 100% with some giant white belt who might kick me in the eyeball and injure me, right? I get nothing out of this. I don't get any medals. It doesn't help my career. So as you get older, you kind of learn to pick your shots. Who wins and loses in the gym is the least important thing. And if you look at high performance jiu-jitsu athletes, if you watch the way they train, a lot of the time they're very scientific about it. They're not in there necessarily trying to beat everyone up in the gym. They're creating games and systems to maximize the quality of their training time. And that might look like they get tapped 20 times in a single day, but that can still be an amazing training session if they actually got better out of it.
Yeah, and one thing I love is like I'm sure you build this community within your own academy and this supportive mentality as a coach and stuff like that. How important do you think it is that coaches do this in their academy? Because we see it on Instagram and stuff like that, like coaches yelling at kids, choking them out, like real destructive environments and stuff like that. How important do you think it is for someone to find that environment, and how do they know if they have it or not?
I think this is probably one of the areas of jiu-jitsu that coaches will really start to capitalize on in the next 5 or 10 years. The big conversation throughout my entire jiu-jitsu run, I started training in 2008, I want to say. And ever since then, it's always been about technique, right? Like, how do you actually learn to do more stuff and tap out people in the gym? And of course, we've seen that evolve over the last few years where people have realized that, look, sports science tells us that there's more to getting good than just tapping people out. The ecological dynamics movement, right, for example, is an illustration of how we can use intelligent classroom design to actually build up skill. It's more than just a fight club, right? In fact, the fight club is the least important part of jiu-jitsu. If we want to get better, we want to be scientific about it. But I think the next big thing that not nearly enough coaches are talking about is the human element. How we engage with people, keep them motivated, train them to be better regulators of their own emotions, help them with their mindset, help them not feel like they're worthless, help them understand that they have value to the team regardless of their rank. I've always told people, like, look, you can talk about ecological dynamics and sports science all you want, but in my opinion, if you really want to leapfrog the rest of the coaches out there, maybe you should study emotional intelligence. Because if you can't make people in the gym care about training and care about themselves and care about their training partners, if they don't feel motivated to come into class, it doesn't matter how good your training methods are. So I think there is a massive opportunity for coaches to leverage this. And in fact, on BJJ Mental Models, we've talked about this a lot recently, and we've made a lot of courses about this recently that are less focused on how do we do the perfect armbar, and they're more focused on how do we build the perfect culture where what we're doing transcends just teaching people how to do, heel hooks and stuff, but how do we actually build the kind of culture that people really want to be a part of, where this is that third place in their life beyond work and home life. This is a pillar of how they enjoy life, how they meet people, how they give back to their community, how they tighten and refine their mindset. And a lot of that is just soft skills. In the corporate world, people have known for decades that soft skills are tremendously important. In fact, they often outperform hard skills a lot of the time. And I think in jiu-jitsu, we're starting to see that. I'm surprised that people haven't clued into this more, because a lot of the best coaches out there right now do not have the best competition records, but they are the best coaches. And part of that is because they know how to make people care, and they know how to keep people motivated and get them over humps and through difficult times. So I absolutely think that gym culture is one of the most important ways that you can help people get better at jiu-jitsu. I think that if people are sufficiently motivated, the jiu-jitsu will mostly take care of itself. It's mostly about making sure that people actually care, they enjoy being here, they feel safe, they feel included, they like the people they train with, they believe in the mission of the gym. That stuff goes a long way. And I would encourage people who really want to be the best coach out there, maybe put down, a lot of the expectations that they have about what good coaching looks like, and focus on the human element first.
Yeah, I you said something in there. I can't agree with more. And I always preach this. I've been saying it for years, coming from like a fitness background and like a weightlifting background. I would always tell people like, and I've said it on the podcast quite a few times too, is like, uh, every Olympic coach wasn't, or every Olympic champ coach wasn't an Olympic champ. You know what I mean? Like, they, just because you didn't achieve the highest performance of your sport doesn't mean that you can't deliver the highest coaching performance in the sport. You know what I mean? And I feel like competition and stuff like that, really gets put at the forefront for a lot of people to, like, if they want to compete, you know what I mean? Or they want to look for a coach that has accolades, if they understand that. But I have friends that have opened up academies at blue belt or purple belt, and they have an academy full of students. You know what I mean? Because, like you mentioned, they have this culture. They're able to talk to people. They're able to provide why they're valuable to them, and be able to help these people grow and become better at jujitsu. Right? I mean, a white belt's going to walk in and see my purple belt, and not have any inclination of what it even means. But if I greet them with a smile, I say, "Hey, welcome to jujitsu. This is what we're going to do here," and then I build that culture of like, "Hey, I'm going to be honest with you. You're not going to be good for a while." And that's okay. And we're here for that. You know what I mean? We're all here for that. We're all at this level of like, I'm not good at jujitsu, but I enjoy the people here. That's why I like CrossFit so much too, is because it's like it's just the atmosphere. Everyone's there trying to do the same thing, trying to get better. Yeah, you have some dickheads in there that are, they want to look good for the gram or whatever and stuff like that. They want to post their highlight reels. But for the most part, gym culture to me is like, it is like the quintessential thing. That's the first thing I tell people to do when they go to a new academy. Go sit in the class, feel what it feels like to be there. You know what I mean? Like, how are people being treated? How are mistakes being treated and stuff like that? Because you can make a mistake in class, whether it's your own fault or someone else's, and get yelled at by someone in class because you made the mistake. Like, whoa, bro! Like, I thought this was a learning place. I thought this was a house of learning doctors.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this might be controversial to a lot of people, but I'll say it, right? Good jujitsu is not as valuable a skill as you think it is. Good jujitsu is just a commodity at this point. There is no shortage of good jujitsu coaches out there, right? I mean, think about who your favorite people in the jujitsu sport are. The biggest names you can think of. You know what? If you really want access to their jujitsu, you can probably hire them for a few $100, right? And if you're on a budget, you can still find amazing people who will do it for a fraction of the price. This is not 1990 anymore. We do not have a shortage of people who are good at jujitsu. Good jujitsu is just a commodity now, like oil or gas or eggs, right? There's a lot of it out there. And you, as a coach, regardless of how many medals you've won, you are not nearly as special as you think you are. If you want to build a successful gym and ultimately make money, right? You need to be thinking less about how good is my jiu-jitsu and more about how can I make everyone in my room feel like they belong here and that they're getting value out of being here. On the topic of failure, right? The problem with a lot of people who look, who are all about jujitsu first, technique is the only thing that matters, is look, you can be an amazing 20-time world champion, but if you make everyone in your gym feel terrible because you're constantly just beating the shit out of them, I mean, yes, they will go on Instagram and talk about, oh, wow, this guy's such a great coach. He taps me 20 times every time we roll. That is not the sign of a good coach, right? How quickly and frequently your coach can kick your ass is not the sign of good coaching. That's the sign of trauma bonding. That's a very different thing, right? So I encourage everyone who has a jiu-jitsu first jiu-jitsu academy to understand that jiu-jitsu is just a commodity now. You are replaceable as a jiu-jitsu coach. It doesn't matter how many medals you've won or how many times you've podiumed at IBJJF. Literally nobody other than you cares. Nobody cares. I'm sorry, but nobody cares. There are so many jiu-jitsu world champions out there now that it is impossible to keep track of them. Good jiu-jitsu is not a differentiator at this point. And the problem with a jiu-jitsu first gym is that they often make the people in the gym feel bad because the coach feels the need to show everyone how good their jiu-jitsu is because that's their marketing. That's how they define themselves. And I mean, if everyone in your gym just feels like they're going in there and they're going through a meat grinder and they're getting their ass kicked, it doesn't speak well for their skill development or your retention rate. I think that a good gym is one that is better able to embrace everyone at all levels. I mean, if you look around at your room and it's only 20-year-old dudes, you have no one older, you have no women, that is a red flag because that means that you don't have a jiu-jitsu gym. You have a fight club. You have people just trying to beat the crap out of each other. And normal people who, frankly, are the ones who bring the money into the sport are being driven away. And that ties into the relationship with failure, right? A good coach will structure the class in such a way that everyone feels like they're winning somehow, regardless of how that is. That doesn't always mean that they're tapping out everyone in the room, but it can mean that they are getting real measurable improvement because the coach is paying attention to them, is affirming their progress. Or maybe they're adding value to the team in other ways, right? I know people in the sport who are very successful, and it's not because of their competition record, but it's because they brought in some skill set from the real world that just happens to be in demand in jiu-jitsu. A good friend of mine who's been on BJJ Mental Model, Sarah Rafferty, she's not a particularly notable competitor. I think she's a purple belt, but she is amazing as an agent for jiu-jitsu athletes. So she represents Adele Fornerino and a bunch of other people. And that's because her background in corporate is something that she can parlay into jiu-jitsu. Everyone has value that they can add onto the mats beyond just who's tapping who. And so when people tell me that they don't feel like they're good at this because they're failing all the time, they're getting tapped all the time, what that often makes me wonder is your gym culture acknowledging the value that you bring? Because if the only thing your gym cares about is who gets tapped on the mats, then of course you're going to feel bad if you get tapped a lot. But if the gym acknowledges that this is a team sport and everyone contributes to the team, and the coach is directly sitting down with you and helping you figure out how you specifically can get better, then it's a lot easier to stay motivated because you can see progress in yourself. So I think that's an important consideration, that a good coach will make sure that everyone in the room feels valued and can see improvement in themselves.
Yeah, you mentioned something in there that that I think is super important too with the women's program. Episode I don't know, maybe 20, maybe 12 of Elbows Type Podcast is with Sonia Salen over in Seattle.
Yes.
You had her on.
Good friend of mine. Sonia's great.
And she is an incredible person. And John and I, my old co-host, we went to her academy and trained with her and then interviewed her afterwards. And the first thing we noticed when we walked in was the amount of women in the academy. I was astonished with her women's program. She has like a all women's class, and it was, I mean, if you've been to her academy, her mat was full of women. And then even in like her normal class, there was a lot of women. And I was like, this is incredible. and I think maybe it was you that said, like, if you want to see the success of someone's academy, look at their women's program. And like seeing that, I was like astonished about how she's like built that culture and everything in there to allow these people to come in and these women to come in and be like just absolutely crush it. You know what I mean? We don't get a whole lot of women in our academy, and I don't know why. Maybe because our area doesn't have a whole lot of women that want to train. Even at the other bigger academies, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot in their academies either. But they're usually more than us. And I was like, what can we do to like grasp what Sonia has done with hers and like bring like a small microcosm into into our academy to help with that way, because like we like I'm sure you feel the same way. Is like women are probably one of the most important people to learn to train jujitsu. You know what I mean? Like, and I would love to be able to have a culture to where more women could come in and feel welcomed and stuff like that. How do you uh build that culture within your academy to do that?
Okay, so I've got some thoughts on this. This is something, of course, that we've talked a lot about on mental models. The main thing that I observe with when people think about women, I hear so many jujitsu gym owners say that, look, they would love to build up a better women's program, to have more women come, but they only have like one woman who trains with them. And the first thing that I would say is we need to stop looking at like women as this weird exotic thing that needs to be handled super differently, right? I mean, you see this a lot with like, God, I mean, I don't know about you, but unfortunately, I'm somewhat active on Reddit and on
I try
RPJJ.
to
It
be
seems
away
like,
from it.
God, it seems like every second post is some dude being like, woman is rolling. How do spar with woman? Where do I put my hands? What do I do? And it's like, okay, the first thing you need to understand is that women are human beings, right?
Right.
And I don't mean that to imply that anyone is sexist or anything, but like, look, people are people, right? People like to feel included. They like to feel appreciated. They like to feel valued. And we need to keep that in mind when we bring in women. If we treat them like these weird, like unicorns or leprechauns who come into the gym and need like special handling, right out of the gate, we've got a problem. Now, that said, I think that if you really want to have women in the gym, we have to understand an aspect of human psychology, which is that if you walk into a room and there is no one in there like you, then you immediately are going to start wondering, am I in the right room? That is a very unfortunate thing about human psychology, because that is kind of how we wound up getting tribalized and grouped. And,
Reputation matters.
it's not great, but
Yeah.
it is a part of our psychology. If a woman walks into your gym and there's no women's change room and there's no other women training there, they're going to be like, oh, I don't think this is the gym for me. And the thing that we need to understand is this is not a thing about women. This is a thing about any different group of people that you want to potentially target, right? If you are interested in targeting Asian Americans or Asian Canadians, or if you're interested in, specifically catering towards any other discriminated class, if you want to bring in more gay or non-binary or trans people, right? It's going to be the same thing. If someone walks into a room and they don't see any example that people like them have succeeded there, they're going to be a little bit suspicious, right? And they're going to understandably be a little bit skeptical, right? Like if you walked into a jiu-jitsu gym and it was full of nothing but 60-year-old old ladies knitting who speak Vietnamese and not English, right? You're going to immediately wonder, like, well, how can I fit in here? And is that good? No, that's not good, right? That's absolutely not good. But one of the things that a gym coach can do is help us overcome those biases and bring people together, even if they are different. So if you are interested in building up like a women's program, for example, or really any type of group you want to cater to that you don't have, you need to go out of your way to demonstrate that this is a home for those people. Part of that is going to be messaging. Like, who's on your website, right? If I go to your website and it's all jacked dudes, I'm not going to interpret that as a gym that's friendly for women. Or if I show up at the gym and there's no women's change room, that is immediately going to be probably a deal breaker. If I'm the only woman in the room, that's going to be very concerning to me. And this is why so many gyms will work really hard to try to get try to get like basically a core group of people in that demographic they're targeting to try to come in. And that might mean that you have to really incentivize the first few people who come in who are within that demographic that you're looking after. But once you get to the point where all of your marketing has a lot of women on it, and women who come in and check out the gym, they see that there's a lot of other girls there, a lot of other women there, that makes it a lot easier, right? And that's not a man woman thing. That's just unfortunately, it's a natural bias that we all have, right? If I walk into a room and I get the vibe that this is not a place that cares about representing people like me, I'm going to leave. So I think that it goes beyond that too, into also things like choice of language, things that people don't talk about, right? I have heard some pretty gross humor in jiu-jitsu over the years, and dudes think it's harmless, but the problem is when you talk like that, you're basically telling certain other groups of people that this is not a place for them. They're a joke here. They don't belong here. They're a joke we will make fun of you at your expense. You don't want that. So it is far better for coaches who really want to cater to other groups, to bring in representation from other groups, to make a deliberate effort to cater towards them. That doesn't mean bending over backwards to do crazy stuff or getting too performative or anything, but just do your best to try to bring in a good group of women who train together there and help foster that and let that grow on its own. So that would be my advice there. Like of course, every gym owner in America and Canada, where I live, is going to want to have lots of women training, right? I mean, if you can get women to train jiu-jitsu, you basically double your customer base. That's great. Right, everyone wants that. But are you willing to actually do the things that you need to do in order to cater to those people? And I would also say that a huge divide in jiu-jitsu is not even just men and women, but it is young athletes versus regular people. If you build the perception that your gym is only for sub 30 competitors who care about being the best in the world, you are immediately handicapping yourself, because you are losing access to the most lucrative customer base out there, and also the customer base that frankly will probably benefit from jiu-jitsu the most, right? So I always encourage people to think, like, if your entire training room is a meat grinder, back onto the topic of failure, where success and failure are measured entirely by who can beat whose ass, then you're going to wind up with a room of very young super athletes. And what you will almost certainly find is that is not enough to pay your bills. So the question then becomes, how do we bring in normal people, right? People who haven't made jiu-jitsu the focal point of their life, people who have not added BJJ to their Instagram handle. Yeah. How do you bring people who have not bought like a weird casual blue belt that they can wear with their jeans so they can walk down the street showing their jiu-jitsu rank? How do we bring in those regular people who don't care about all of that stuff? And again, a lot of this is perception. And a lot of that is really making sure that when you bring in those people, that you embrace them, you help find a way to help them succeed. And you show to them that getting better and success, getting better, learning, being part of the culture, giving back, these are their own rewards. Who gets the tap? That is it's like the result of a science experiment. It matters, but at the end of the day, it's just a task. It's just something that we do here and there as part of the process, right? Same with competition. These are just things that we do to test our results. The most important thing is, are we getting better at this together, and are we improving the quality of everyone's lives? If your gym isn't doing that, you will always struggle to bring in new people.
Yeah, and one thing that I've recently started doing, and it's something that I've not necessarily struggled with, but I'm trying to figure out how to navigate is as a coach, I started coaching like our beginners class in the mornings twice a week, or 1 to 2 times a week. And as a coach, I'm like trying to figure out how to foster, we've been talking about this whole time, like failure is okay and stuff like that, without being, I guess, like overbearing, I guess what I'm saying, or like fostering like that environment of like not trying, or like it's okay to like not do your best kind of like idea, right? Because I feel like we can walk this fine line of like pushing people to try and then telling them it's okay, and then never expecting people, like never putting expectations on people so they don't feel like discouraged, if that makes sense, right? Like we make the environment a little too soft for what we're doing. We're not baking cakes. It is going to be hard. You need to put effort in. You know what I mean? Like, don't expect to get someone's elbows away from them by going, excuse me, can you please, like, I need you to move your elbow. Like, you know what I mean? Like you got to use some force. It is a physical activity. And as a coach, I'm trying to figure out that balance of like being serious, but at the same time, like not, if that makes sense. You understand what I'm trying to get at here?
Yes. To me, this is a distinction of process and outcome, right? When we worry about who's tapping people in the gym, we're worried about the outcome. and we can't always control the outcome. What we should be more concerned about is the process. And on that front, you talked about the effort that's put in. We always want to encourage people to put in the best effort they can, right? We don't want people to come in and put in like a half-assed effort. Really, we should
Yeah.
always be encouraging people to do your best. However, what we need to understand is that everyone's best is going to vary. And also, it's not a constant, right? Everyone's best varies sometimes on a day by day basis, right? If you suffered some massive personal tragedy, if you got laid off at your job this afternoon, and then you come into jiu-jitsu 2 hours later, you're probably not going to be able to do your best, right? If you just got injured, you can't do your best. That's fine. You want to do your best given where you're at right now. Something that a good coach I know once said is like, look, I want you to give 100% of what you've got. What you've got might vary. Maybe the best you can do right now is you can give 40% today. Maybe that's all you got. Cool. Give 100% of that 40%. Do the best with what you have. Let me give an example too, right? A big part of jiu-jitsu is just consistency, just showing up over time. Good friend of BJJ Mental Models is a wrestling coach out of the States, a guy named Nick Perler. And he talks about how consistency and habit are two of the most important things in combat sports. And one of the things he tells people is you need to make sure that you make training and participation in this culture a habit. Exactly how much you can do and provide is going to vary on a day by day basis, but you still need to keep the habit going. Like, okay, did you get injured? Did you break your leg? Okay, you can't wrestle today. Understandable. But you know what you still need to do is you still need to hop in the car and come here because that was your routine. As soon as you start flopping on the routine, it's really hard to get it back. Or I don't know, maybe you've got like a terrible migraine headache or food poisoning or something. Okay, cool. Drive to the gym, get out of your car, stop, get back in your car and go home, right? Even if you didn't train at all, you kept the habit going. And I really like that way of looking at things, right? We need to understand as coaches that when we tell people to do their best, that doesn't mean I want to see you tap out 30 people in the room. It literally just means that wherever you're at with whatever you've got, I want you to give as much as you can. Safely, of course, right? I mean, we don't want people to get injured or do anything stupid, but give as much as you reasonably can. We know that some days you're going to be able to give 100%. Some days it's only going to be 40%, right? We all have bad days. That's part of it. But the important thing is if you keep at it, then eventually your definition of giving 100% is going to get a lot better than it used to be, right? I mean, I can say this, right? As a black belt now, when I was a white belt, I would go in and I was a dumb young idiot. I had little sense of self-regard. I would do anything to avoid getting tapped. I would like backflip out of arm bars. I would do anything I could to avoid getting tapped. I was training like an idiot. I was giving 100% and I was not really getting great results, right? Now as a black belt, right? I would not have to give near 100% to beat up that person that I used to be, right? You see progress over time. And it gets to the point, the more you do this, it gets to the point where you start to develop enough of a skill base that you will be able to tell the difference between where you are now and where you used to be. The only way you can see that is with consistency, right? I mean, look, there, as the saying goes, there's levels to this, right? There are amazing black belts out there who could rip me in half, no question, right? But at the end of the day, if you throw me in there with 99% of white or blue belts, I feel pretty good about my odds, right? And part of that is not to do with my athleticism or my skill or anything. It's just years and years of doing this and failing and ultimately accepting there is no silver bullet. There is no magic answer to get better, right? I know everyone wants that. Like, what is the hack that will make me get better? I don't want to get tapped. I want to tap everyone. The hack is be consistent. That is really the only hack. And over time, you will get better. That doesn't mean you'll get as good as Gordon Ryan or Fionn Davies, right? But it means that if you want to hit your own max potential, however you define that, you just need to be consistent and you need to give as best as you can within those limitations of every day. And over time, you see the results. That there is no magic formula. Unfortunately, that's all there is to it.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest frustrations that I've dealt with in my journey is not like being jealous of it or anything like that, but seeing other people's progress because they were consistent while I wasn't. And I'm like, man, these guys are crushing it now. Like, if I would have just stuck with it, I would be
Yep.
right there with them. You know what I mean? And that is like so frustrating because, being a dad of three kids, two littles and a teenager, I'm like, there's a lot of times, well, not necessarily anymore because my life switched around, but back in the day, it'd be hard to, you know, get off of working, a 10-hour day, coming home, taking care of the kids for a minute, and then going to jujitsu because it was like I would get off work at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, come home, jujitsu's at 6:30, goes to about 8 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? In my mind, I'm like, this just seems so daunting to have to go to class tonight when my day has been so like hectic. And I would succumb to that internal speech of validating why I wouldn't go too many times at one point in my jiu-jitsu journey. And people that would keep showing up even through the hard moments were now they're surpassing me. They're I'm like, dang man, if only I would have been there that whole time. You know what I mean? Like that's so frustrating to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can absolutely relate. I remember when I was a white belt, there was this guy in my gym who was a blue belt, and he used to just beat me up. Like he would toy with me. He would do things like put me in a triangle for 5 minutes, but not quite finish it, just to see what I would do if I could get out. Right? Like he would just kind of play with me like a cat plays with a mouse. He took off for many, many years. He came back. He was still a blue belt. I was a brown belt by that time, and we rolled. And it was not close, right? Like it was not close at all. This guy who used to beat the bejesus out of me, I just sliced right through him, right? And he was very demoralized by the whole experience because I used to be the guy that he would toy with, right? He was bigger than me, he was stronger than me. Turns out that doesn't matter once you got 8 or 10 years of technique under your belt. So that kind of consistency matters over time. However, I would say this: often in jiu-jitsu, people use the word failure or I'm not good enough, when really what they probably should be saying is I have different life priorities.
Yeah,
And that is
agreed, 100%.
100% fine, right? Like this is a sport where most of the media personalities, other than like you and me, most of the media personalities that you know are people who are tremendously gifted naturally, tremendously enhanced unnaturally, and they're young and they've devoted 100% of their life to jujitsu. It is the only thing they care about, right? And so when you listen to them talk, you will be put under the perception that the way that they do things is normal and that this being good at jujitsu is the only thing that matters. I mean, I'll tell you this though, as I get older, I increasingly realize that jujitsu is not the only thing that matters. It is a great practice for staying fit, meeting people, learning to overcome resilience, learning to protect yourself, learning how to learn. It's an amazing tool, but it's not life, right? It's just one of many things. You know, you talked about taking days off just a second ago. I mean, when I was when I was in my 20s, I used to really pat myself on the back because of how dedicated I was. I would go to the gym twice a day. I would train jujitsu once a day, and then I would go and I would work out afterwards, right? So that was like 14 trips to the gym every week. I was very dedicated, and it showed. I was pretty good for someone that inexperienced at that age. But then I realized there's more to life than this bullshit, right? I mean, as an example,
Amen.
like, today I was looking at my schedule and I could have trained jujitsu in the morning. I didn't. Why? Because it was my kid's birthday party. That's more important, right? You learn that jujitsu is not all that there is to life. And so when people talk about failure, they often think that means like, oh, I'm just not good at this sport. I'm getting tapped by people. I would encourage everyone to have perspective because we all come into this with different odds, right? And different life backgrounds. If you came into jujitsu as a 40-year-old accountant and you have never done anything athletic in your life, and you are training in there with people who are 20 years old, and they were put into the sport at 8 years old by their Brazilian parents, right? And jujitsu is everything they do. You should not be upset if they steamroll you. You should not take that as a blow to your ego, even. It should be expected, right? If you are a hobbyist and someone is a pro, you should expect that they should beat you. They won't think any less of you, and you shouldn't think any less of yourself. The example I often give is, look, I mean, I don't know about you, but I am not great at accounting or finance. I got an accountant for that. He's great. I send him a bit of money every year and he does my taxes and I don't have to think about it. I am very grateful for him. I never, after he does my taxes, I never sit down and beat myself up over it. I never think like, fuck, this guy's so good at math and accounting, and I'm such a useless loser. I could never have done this. I am like the worst accountant in the world. I would never think that. Why? Because it's his job. He's a goddamn
Yeah.
accounting service provider. He's built his entire life around being good at this one thing so that he can provide that service to people like me. I am grateful for people like him. And he is grateful for people like me because I allow him to be paid for that skill that he's developed. And it is exactly the same in jiu-jitsu. If you are training with a bunch of young super athletes who have made a job out of jiu-jitsu, who train incredibly religiously, of course they're going to beat you up. That doesn't, if you're training like once or twice a week and you're 40 or 50 and you got kids and you got other, that is not a reflection of your skill. That is a reflection of where jiu-jitsu fits into your life versus theirs. And that's not good or bad. It's just different, right? I mean, look, I love video games. I play video games my whole life. I am a
Amen.
very, very dedicated gamer. Okay. And I know that like people are listening to this and they think, oh, I play games too. It's like, no, homie. No, homie. I play way more video games than anyone listening to this. I guarantee it. But you know what? I do it for fun. There has never been a moment in my life where I've thought, you know what I need to do? I need to quit my job and become a professional esports player and move to Korea and compete. And no one has ever sat me down and told me, Steve, you're wasting your life because you're not good enough at video games, right? It's a hobby for me. It's something that I do for fun because it fills a need in my life. And jujitsu is exactly the same thing. But in jujitsu, because it is this intimate experience where one person wins and one person loses, it's very easy to take it as a blow to your ego and your sense of self-worth. And I implore everyone listening to this to not ever do that, right? If some MMA professional who's 20 years old and trains all the time beats you in a roll, that's amazing. That means jujitsu works. That means you have great training partners who can challenge you and teach you stuff. You should not feel bad because you're not on their level. Of course you're not on their level. You're doing this for fun, right? They're doing this seriously. So I really encourage people in jiu-jitsu to understand that not everyone needs to be Gordon Ryan in order to get value out of the sport. 99% of the people who train the sport and love the sport are regular mums and dads, and I love picking on accountants and people doing boring real jobs who just aren't athletic, but they
Yeah.
get something out of the sport that the real world doesn't give to them. The problem is if you listen to jiu-jitsu media and podcasts and stuff like that, you get the perception that like if you're not competing in ADCC, you're dog shit. That is not true. Jiu-jitsu is not about whether you can tap out Dante Leon. Jiu-jitsu is about whether you are improving your own life, however you measure that. And that is the thing that people need to focus on.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like one thing to kind of like add on to what you mentioned in there is like taking a break or I noticed that sometimes like my skill acquisition after a break feels much higher because I've stepped away from the mats. I've given my time that my brain time to like recoup what I've learned and stuff like that. And I just feel like so much better when I get on the mats. Like I'm much more grateful to be on the mats, right? I'm much more excited to show up to class, see my friends and stuff like that because I've broken up the routine for a short period, maybe a week. You know, I might skip one or two classes, and then the next week I'm like, all right, my body feels better. I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? And like, I just go in with this whole different mindset of like, this is going to be fun. I don't care what happens in class. I'm just excited to go back and to train with my friends. And I just feel so much better on the mats. You know, is that something you experience too?
100%. And this is, oh God, this is another big mindset shift, right? I remember as a white belt, I used to get really depressed and upset when I had to take time off jujitsu.
Same.
And it wasn't always a big layoff. I mean, there would be times when like I'd tweak my toe or something and I'd have to take a week off. And I feel like, oh my God, the world's over. Once you've been through a few long layoffs, you realize not only is it not as big a problem as you thought it was, but the ability to distance yourself and step back and reassess and come back stronger, that's a real thing. I remember the first time I met Oliver Taza. He was in Vancouver. He had a really bad knee injury. I think it was an ACL rip or something, and he had to get surgery. And he was going to be off for like a year. And he was just like jubilant about the whole thing. He was fine with it. And I remember thinking that, geez, if I were a professional jiu-jitsu athlete and I tore my ACL, I would be in like a catatonic depression. And this guy's totally fine with it. And what he said was like, well, you know what? Injuries happen, but I'm going to use this opportunity to do the things I can't do when I'm training. I'm going to network. I'm going to go out and I'm going to meet new people. I'm going to set up seminar opportunities. I'm going to build my brand. That's how he met me, right? He's been on BJJ Mental Models many times. I have benefited tremendously from that, as hopefully has he. And he's not the only person I've heard that from. I've realized over time, and this is unfortunately the kind of thing that you can't teach, but people will only believe it through experience. Layoffs are really not that bad. When you have to take time off, it is an opportunity to clear your head, reset, and come back even stronger and with fresh perspectives. That makes a big, big difference. So if you are a white or blue belt and you feel awful because something has happened that takes you off the mats, whether it be life circumstances or injury or anything else, I always encourage people, don't let that be something that depresses you. Find a way to still stay part of this thing you love, right? There's a lot of things that you can do if you can't train directly. Jiu-jitsu is not always just about mat time. There's a lot of things that you can do that will help you beyond just sparring. Use those opportunities to try other things and get excited about the fact that when you come back, you're going to be a different person. I mean, yeah, you might come back with, some rust on you from cardio, or maybe it's going to take a while to rehab your injuries if that's what happens. But when you come back, you will be a different person. And what I have seen is every time I've come back, or every time I've left, when I've come back to jiu-jitsu, guess what? It was still there for me. It didn't go anywhere. And it was an opportunity for me to reinvent myself, which is hugely valuable if you're going to be doing anything for a long term.
Yeah, and like one thing I tell people too, and my wife, she likes to compete in bodybuilding, and she signed up for another show later this year. And one thing I tell her is like yeah, you may feel like you're obviously not where you were last show, but what I tell everyone, including in jujitsu, is like, but your base, like where you're going to start, is so much higher than it
Mhm.
was before that, right? Like if you take a break from jujitsu, your base where you're going to be starting is so much higher than you could even imagine. You're going to be like, oh, I like you mentioned, like, oh, it's still there, right? Okay, like yeah, there might be a little dust, there might be a little bit of cognitive like delay of like, oh, that's right, I was supposed to grab this foot here. But guess what? We still do that even when we train all the time. It's only natural. It's like so don't look at it in like a negative thing. That's like one thing that my mindset is, or my perspective has really shifted, is like taking a break from jujitsu, failures and stuff like that. And it only truly sinks in, the more mature, I guess you could say, in your journey, right? Like when we're very young and naive in our journey, we're like, yeah, I don't want to take a break, like you said. Like, no, I have to show up and train. That's the only way I'm ever going to get better. That's the only way I'm going to get my blue belt. And for me, same thing, dude. When I was a white belt, John and I would train as much as possible. John's like 10 years older than me, so he was in his late 30s when we started training. And he's obviously much different than I was, and we both would be there trying to train, beating up our bodies and everything like that. And like we're like, we can't stop. We got to get our blue belts. We gotta get it promoted. And then once we achieved that goal, we're like, oh, so what do we do now? It's like
Yep.
we're gonna be here a while, and it's like, and then you fall out of love with it. I have a buddy who's recently started content creation, and he wanted to do like daily videos, like jujitsu videos and stuff like that, or like as many as he could in a week. And I was like, hey, um, if you can keep up the pace, by all means, man. But there's gonna be a time when you're like, I don't really feel like doing this right now, and you should be okay with that. Like, don't feel the pressure of having to do something. If it's like you mentioned, it's a hobby. It's something that you're doing for fun. This is no one's full time job that probably listens to the show. If I have a world champ, if Gordon Ryan listens to my show, what's up, dude? Pleasure to have you on. But but like most people that even listen to my stuff are just normal people that just want to a break from everything. They want to listen to like a real conversation between real people, and they don't need this whole like, you need to be there every day. This is the only thing that matters. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's it can be very overwhelming if you look at jujitsu from the lens of being there is the only way to get it. I tell people all the time, talking about jujitsu helps with your skill, like talking through things after class, watching instructionals, right? Not everything has to happen on the mats. Not every time you get submitted or you feel that you're failing has to happen on the mats, or the winning is going to happen on the mats. Like you can do it off the mats too. Record yourself when you roll, rewatch when you did. Like that was a big thing that I realized. It was the first time I recorded myself. I was sitting there watching the videos like, dude, I was crushing it in this round. Come to find out, I was laying on my back flat for 2.5 minutes, just trying to get a one elbow in. You know what I mean? Like there's other ways you can gain and grow in jujitsu that doesn't involve 100% mat time, right?
Yeah, man, recording yourself rolling is something else, man. Like I think you know this. We have a coaching service on BJJ Mental Models Premium where we do rolling reviews and people can
Shout
send
out.
in their footage, and it's always such. Yeah, that was a little bit intentional, maybe too intentional. That was, God, the first time I ever watched myself rolling, it was eye opening because in my own head, I have this idea of how like graceful and perfect my technique is.
You look
And
incredible.
then when I watch it, it's like I am a fucking oaf. Like I move like an idiot. I'm surprised I'm not falling over. This is working somehow. I think maybe I'm not sure how it is, but like I'm not going to sell any BJJ fanatics instructionals rolling like this. So it's an interesting example of how when you're in the moment, your perception of things is very different from if you take a step back, right? If you are rolling, you will feel differently about it versus if you watch the footage of yourself rolling later. And I think the same thing applies to the way that people think about jujitsu and failure. It might feel like you're failing at the time, but with the perspective of a bit of distance, whether it be time, right? Like looking at this over a long window, or even the perspective of just how someone else would be viewing you in the situation, you're probably not failing as much as you can. What you think of as failure is probably an appropriate part of the learning process. And that's a mindset thing. If you look at that as failure, then you discourage yourself and you reduce your desire to stay consistent. But if you look at whatever setbacks you're having as part of the learning process, they can actually be motivating, right? I mean, one of the big breakthroughs in my mindset, I used to, like everyone else, I used to hate plateaus, right? Where I'd feel like, I just haven't gotten any better in the last month or two. But what I've realized now is I don't hate plateaus anymore. I actually quite love plateaus because I know that if I hit a plateau, that means a big breakthrough is probably about to happen. And I can't control exactly when that's going to happen. But if I stay consistent, someone's going to show me something, or I'm going to wind up in a situation where I learn something and it's going to change everything for me. So it's something to get excited about. It's not something to get sad about. And very often in jiu-jitsu, when we worry about our success or failure, it's really a mindset thing more than a hard, fast, absolute rule. And people need to remember that, right? A lot of the things that we have mentally framed as failures could equally be considered a success if looked at the right way.
Yeah, that's such a great point. You know, it's like if you just push through the hard times, like a lot of the times you're going to come through the other side with like a big victory. And not only like someone teaching you something or something like sometimes you could just hear the same message over and over again, and then one time someone says it just slightly different, and then it clicks. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, that's what you mean? It's like, yeah, I've been telling you that the whole time. It's like, yeah, but that makes more sense now. It's like, well, it's the same message. It's just now that, you know, a little bit of a perspective change or something like that has really switched it to where now you understand and you can make like this big progress. That's a great way to look at plateaus. I haven't thought about it in that way because it's so hard to keep that positively through the plateaus when you're just sitting there just banging your head against the wall. You're just like, why can't I progress? Why can't I progress? And instead of looking at that and like, oh, well, maybe if I just move around this wall a little bit, oh, what's that? You know what I mean? So that's good, man.
Yep. The secret to plateaus is not to get demoralized and not to feel like there's something wrong with you. The secret to plateaus is to understand that the only way to break through a plateau is consistency and to keep trying. And there's no magic solution to how to do it, right? Because every person's plateau is different. So there is no answer that anyone can give you. The only thing to do is to figure out, well, it's one of those moments. That's happened. And, you know, when you get to black belt, this gets a lot easier because, you know, if you've been training for 2 years and you hit a 1 month plateau, that feels awful. But if you've been training for like 10 plus years, I mean, look, honestly, I've had like year-long plateaus, right? It happens. But at some point you realize if jujitsu is an end in and of itself, if training is its own reward, then I don't have to worry so much about am I getting better today or not. I'm here to train. I'm here because this practice adds value to my life. And I have faith that if I just trust the process and keep doing this, the results will come. I will get better. I can't always control how or when or even why that happens. But what I can control is my consistency.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, this was a great conversation tonight, man. Thank you so much for your time. I would love to end with one more question, the same one that I always ask. If you could give one piece of advice to a brand new white belt, what would it be?
Don't get injured. That would be the most important thing. It's not the most important lesson in jiu-jitsu, but for white belts, it might be one of them. And the reason why is because, like we talked about, everything in jiu-jitsu comes back to consistency. Whether you are a pro training 7 times a week or you are a hobbyist training once a week, consistency is the answer to getting better. And the easiest way to lose your consistency is to get injured. Injuries at white belt are especially tragic because the stakes are so low. The quality of jiu-jitsu is so dog shit. There is nothing on the table. But the problem is, like, if we're being honest, probably most of our bad injuries happen at white belt because we don't know better and everyone's treating this like Fight Club. So my number one advice to white belts is whatever you do, avoid injury. If you are in any situation where you feel like your spider sense goes off, and learn to trust this in your intuition, by the way, if you ever feel unsafe in a roll, like I feel like something is going to happen, trust your intuition. Just tap. Even if there's no reason, just tap, get out of there, right? It is not worth it. I assure you, it is not worth it. There is no benefit to you to tapping someone in a roll. Nothing is taken away from you if you get tapped in a roll, especially at white belt. So if you ever feel unsafe or you ever feel like I don't know how to get out of this position without injuring myself, then tap. Something that I've heard, I can't remember who it was that said it, but I thought it was a great quote, was that tapping isn't necessarily an acknowledgement of defeat in the gym. It's an acknowledgement of, I don't know how to get out of this. So let's learn. Let's figure it out, right? It should not, you should never feel like the other person is going to tap, snap, or nap you in the gym, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you ever feel unsafe, tap, because the risk of injury is the worst thing for your jiu-jitsu over the long term.
That's a great point, dude. I completely agree, and I wish I would have thought about that more during my white and blue belt days, because there was definitely times when I got injured and I was like, why did I do that, man? Like, now I'm out for 2-3 weeks and now I can't trade at all. And I want to go trade and now I can't. So, but hey, if people want to follow you or listen to your show, if they don't listen for some odd reason, if you guys listen to the show and you don't listen to Steve's show, where can they find you?
Sure. So just Google or search for BJJ Mental Models. We should be pretty easy to find. For those who don't know, BJJ Mental Models is a long-running jiu-jitsu education podcast. We don't really do a lot of like celebrity drama or gossip or anything like that. Every episode that we do is intended to teach you something. We always have a topic. We've got a highly qualified guest, and we've got a conversation that is intended to be a lesson, but we try to structure it organically like a chat to make it easier to digest. We have a variety of guests. I try to feature a combination of both big names, but also people you might not have heard of who are amazing coaches in their own right. So we try to both bring in the best, the people that we know the best are the best, but also to uncover the diamonds that people haven't found yet. Of course, what we're also probably known for is our newsletter. We've got about 13,000 subscribers on there.
Wow.
The newsletter and the podcast are completely free. Again, you can get them all at bjjmentalmodels.com or by Googling BJJ Mental Models. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to go up to the next level with us, we offer BJJ Mental Models Premium, which is, to the best of my knowledge, the biggest library of jiu-jitsu audio courses, a great medium for people who like to learn through audio, through podcasts like this. So I always tell people, if you like Audible or Masterclass and you wish you could have that for jiu-jitsu, BJJ Mental Models Premium is the way that you do that. And of course, we also, as I mentioned earlier, we do coaching as well. So we've got an amazing team of black belt coaches. Our coaching team is over a dozen black belts with a collective 20 world championships between them. So if you want like super high level coaching at a hyper competitive price, BJJ Mental Models Premium is where you do that. So yeah, bjjmentalmodels.com, or just Google us at BJJ Mental Models and you can find us quite easily.
Perfect. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time tonight, man. This was a great conversation. I gained so much from it, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and having this conversation with me tonight, man. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're most welcome, man. I mean, I've been a big fan of Elbows Tight for a long time, both as a jiu-jitsu concept and also as a podcast. I think I was one of your earlier guests long time
Yeah,
ago. And I,
yeah.
th- I think, talking about culture, there's a lot of jiu-jitsu podcasts out there that I just don't enjoy because culturally, I just don't think they really have a vibe. I don't think they add anything, but I've always loved the work that you guys do. Always happy to support. So yeah, I loved having this chat and hopefully it was helpful to everyone else as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree, man. So thank you guys so much for listening and watching at home. Be sure to go check out Steve, like, comment, subscribe, do whatever. Check out Salt Electrolytes, BJJ Mental Models, all that fancy stuff. And I'll catch you guys later. Remember, no oil checks here. Peace.
Peace.